know, hosted by EmAGN Newcastle. This webinar is brought to you by nationally recognised award-winning architect Sarah Lebner, principal architect of Cooee Architecture and founder of my first architecture job. I acknowledge that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Worimi. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you will join us today, and the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I'll now hand you over to Sarah, who will continue the discussion.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me. It's so great to get a chance to chat to Newcastle crew. I know you guys get left out a bit sometimes. And I'm coming to you from our new location on the family farm down by the Murray River at the foothills of the Snowy Mountains, which is Ngarigo country. And I'm really excited to share a presentation with you that's a little bit different today. So let's just jump straight into it. All right, hope you can see that. Okay, so you don't know what you know. I thought that might be a fun little topic to start with today, because I think often when we're in this sort of career advice stage, we focus on what we don't know. And I thought it would be fun to flip that today and talk about things that perhaps you already know and things that I've realized I know, and how you can take those things forward. And I guess I also wanted to talk about this because when I was a student and graduate, I enjoyed the presentations about architecture, but I also, I always wanted to know more about everything around architecture, and I guess try and tap into the insight or knowledge that the architects had beyond just the architecture. So hopefully I can provide a bit of that today. And I want to say I highly recommend grabbing a pen, because I'm going to run through 10 quick ideas, and a lot of them have little prompts for things that you can do or things that you can look up further. So I would recommend grabbing a pen in case you want to jot any of those things down. So me in a nutshell, just so you have some context. So after a couple of jobs in different local firms, 10 years ago, I landed my dream job as a graduate with Lighthouse Architecture and Science. And Lighthouse is a multidisciplinary firm. So it's owned by director Jenny Edwards, who is a building scientist. So a heavy focus on really informed energy efficiency and sustainability approaches. I joined to lead their modular approach, which was sort of a pre-designed system. And there's a bit more about that if you watch the little video that was made when I won the 2020 Emerging Architect Prize. There's a lovely little video about that, and I won't go into that more today. And about 5 years ago, my director architect boss left to become a builder, and I had the just incredible opportunity to step into the principal architect role and lead the team there. And at the start of this year, we were a team of about 16, so 2/3 architecture and 1/3 science, and just an incredible experience there. In 2019, I started testing the ideas for a book called 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School. So I set up the socials and started sharing exactly as it said, the things that I wished I'd known before my first job, because I felt like there were all these resources on construction and architecture, but they were so detailed, and where do you start? And couldn't someone just summarize it in a nutshell? And couldn't someone make it Australia specific as well? You know, a lot of those construction books or advice are American, and it's just completely different. So when I tested it on the socials, it seemed like there was a lot of interest. So in 2020, I published the book, and also won the award that year, and then started an online platform afterwards called the Architect Project, which I can tell you a bit more about later on. And then a few months ago, we decided to move back home regionally to the family farm. And it was at that point I decided to hand over the reins at Lighthouse, a very hard decision, and start my own business, Cooee Architecture, really focusing on helping regional people connect with low carbon homes. So we're going to run through 10 things that you probably already know, you might not realize that you know, I guess epiphanies that I've had at some stage and useful things that you can do with those epiphanies. So the first one is your inner voice is shaped by the external voices in your life. So when I started thinking about writing a book, it was really interesting because my networks, my friends, family, co-workers weren't really familiar with this idea. And so the voices that you hear back at you, some of them might be really thrilled for you, but they sort of say, oh, sounds really hard. I wouldn't know how to go about that. Or sort of cynical views like, yeah, everyone wants to write a book, whatever. You'll never actually do it. And it's really hard to take on a task when the voices around you aren't supportive or informative. And it feels like it's not a reality that is achievable. And that's a really powerful thing to be aware of, because the next point, number 2, you can really easily shape those external voices. So I'm not talking about ditching your friends or your family or perhaps your co-workers, but we have so many ways to insert ourselves into other communities these days. So whether that is reading books is a really obvious one, but listening to podcasts, joining online communities. And when I did that sort of thing, I read Architect and Entrepreneur by Eric Reinhold. I started listening to podcasts about side hustles and passive income and self-publishing, joined some of the groups on Facebook. And then all of a sudden, it just seemed really doable. And I had connections to all these people who had done it, really everyday people. I knew I could reach out to them if I had questions. And when you're just hearing those stories over and over again, it all of a sudden just becomes like a very achievable reality. So I think if you can think about things that you want to achieve that perhaps you don't know how to go about, they might be really foreign ideas to those people you spend time with. You can then be conscious about finding groups of people that you can join who will help you subconsciously and consciously make that a reality. Number 3, you know where to find the answer to everything. So I think when I started out studying and graduating, I was really overwhelmed by wanting to understand everything, know the answer to everything. And now I really accept and enjoy accepting that you never know it all. It's impossible to know it all. Even if you knew it all, the next day you'd wake up and half of it would be out of date. So what I've instead embraced is the idea that it really doesn't matter. And what matters is that you realize that you know where to find the answers to everything. And that's a really comforting and empowering thought. So whether that's about realizing that all the standards and rules hold the answers, realizing that you probably know through your connections people who you can call and ask to find those answers. And all of a sudden it feels less stressful and like a weight is lifted off your shoulder, because you don't have to feel like you're meant to carry around that knowledge. You just know that if you need to, you can pick up the phone or use your networks to find the answer that you need. In fact, there's one of the items in my book is what to do when you don't know the answer. And it's all about practicing a few different lines that you can use easily when people ask you a question that you don't know the answer to. You don't have to say, oh, geez, I don't know that. You can say things like, oh, I'd just like to go back and confirm that with the team, or what do you think? And while they're answering, you sort of pull yourself together and say, yeah, I'm going to check that with the standard, or, I'd like to call someone who's had some experience with this, all these kind of answers to take that pressure off yourself. And so then similarly, you have the ability to have a networked collaborative brain. Once you start valuing the ability to find the answer over knowing the answer, then you can start investing effort into building those networks. When I started at Lighthouse working with a science team, I was sort of a bit worried that maybe that science knowledge would be taken off me and that I'd sort of miss out on that, or I'd lose that autonomy in the science side of design. But the complete opposite happened. It meant that I became so informed without having to do all that legwork, and we still worked in a really collaborative, holistic way. So wherever you can, I think connecting with and collaborating with people who have knowledge different to yours is really empowering to your design. Number 5, you know what you need to change. We all have a goal, and we know what we have to do to get there. Like, we know we need to exercise more to get fitter, or we know we need to be more diligent studying so we can finish assignments on time. But it's the doing it that's hard, right? And one of the biggest things I've learned in this space is about habit creation. Habits are really what create big change in our lives. And there's sort of recipes that you can follow to habits. And there's plenty of books and podcasts on this topic. But in a nutshell, a successful habit needs an intention, a trigger, and then a reward or punishment. So for me, particularly now working on myself, by myself, there's no one around me making me do the work. And I'm a person that's really easily motivated by schedules that I've set myself. So I'm taking those goals, I want to get the work done. But I'm not just saying, I'm going to start my week and plod away at the work and it'll happen. I break it down. I break all the work down into bite-sized tasks so that it all seems really doable. And then I have a fairly strict schedule during the week of knowing when I'm going to get that work done. And then I don't have to think about the when. I don't have to motivate myself. So my trigger in that scenario is time. When I know that it's at that time of the day or the week, I'm going to do my work and work through the tasks. So it's really taking away any sense of self-motivation because I just have to follow my own rules. And the reward is that I get to enjoy the rest of the day with my family or doing what I want. Or the punishment is that I get really stressed if I haven't checked off my own schedule items for that day. So you can see how all of that wouldn't work if I had no plan for my week. 6, this one's an interesting one. You know who your imposter syndrome voice comes from. This has been on the front of my mind because I'm currently developing a career momentum course, which I'll tell you about later. But this week I've been working on the tackling imposter syndrome topic, and a really clear exercise sticks in my mind on this. I did a workshop on, I think it was on influential communication and leadership. And the exercise was, if you think about your imposter syndrome voice, the kind of things you worry about and the voices in your head, can you give that voice a face? Is there a person you know who could embody that voice? And when I went through this exercise, this was really obvious to me because I'd had an unfortunate run-in with a local senior, fairly well-respected architect, and it had become a big insecurity of mine. So I could really see that this person could potentially embody where my imposter voices came from. And then the next part of the exercise was to write down, well, if this imposter confronted you in the worst case scenario, what would they say? And again, I knew instantly what they would say. At that time in my career, it would have been things like, oh, she's a dreamer, she just needs to pull her head in, or she's too big for her boots, or something I had heard said about a lot of local successful female architects at the time, that she claws her way up the back of others to get to where she wants to be. Now, in reality, I don't even know whether I don't think that person would even say those things about me. But isn't it funny that these were the insecurities that I had created for myself in my head? And then the next part of the exercise is asking yourself, well, what would you say to that person if they came up to you in the street and said those things to you? And I thought that was really powerful, because if this person said those things, I'd be furious. I would fight them black and blue about how fake these accusations were and how I deserved a seat at the table. And I think that's a very powerful scenario to go through yourself, because even though I would argue with these voices also came from me. So even if your imposter syndrome perhaps has some elements of truth to it, if you were to face that character, I'm sure you would still argue with them about perhaps if they're not wrong, but perhaps why that information is irrelevant, or why they're blowing something out of proportion, or why you still deserve a seat at the table, or why you deserve to be working on that project. So I spent a bit longer on that one, but it's a very interesting exercise to take yourself through. Number 7, you're already great at your strengths. This was a real aha moment for me. We interviewed Sanaya Norton, was our guest in the Architect Project, my membership platform, and we were talking about working on your communication weaknesses. And she made this great point. She said, yes, we should know what our weaknesses are and we should work on them, but you should also be aware of what your strengths are, because people usually aren't that across what their strengths are. They seem so inherent to us that we don't even realize that they are strengths or things that other people don't find easy. And then B, if you spend time honing your strengths like an elite athlete would, they become your superpower. So if you do think about that elite athlete scenario, elite athletes, yes, they have to work on their weaknesses, but the whole reason they are the best of the best is because they know what their strengths are and then they play to their strengths. So if you can either work out what your strengths are, or in the course, I encourage people to ask some people around them what, say, their communication strengths are. The answers you get are always really interesting. And then you can hone those and hold those as your superpower and let them carry you forward. 8, you know why you're doing this. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Zane McFarlane, but I was in a session that he did that was all about getting back to your reasons for doing what you're doing. And he had some very provocative questions, and 2 that I never forgot. He said, what's great about where you're from? What are you proud of? So it's really talking about either people will interpret that differently. Some people might think of where they're from as in where they're at now and the context they're in now. And some people will think about it as where their origins are from. And then you flip it and you say, what's embarrassing about where you're from? And your answer to that sometimes can be a very inherent or subconscious driver for why you do what you do. And it can be an interesting thing to ponder to help reiterate your mission or your reason and motivation for being on the path that you're on. And thirdly, Erin Crowden, who was the state emerging architect for South Australia in 2020, she had a great question. We often say, what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago, etc. But she said, if the you 10 years from now came back to talk to you, what do you think they might say? And that's another one that sort of helps you tap into some of those things you know within yourself, but you never face, that you perhaps should face. Number 9, you care too much about what other architects think. You know this, we all know this, we all do it. We're trained to do it. We are trained in university to care a whole lot about what our tutors think, what the panel thinks, what our other students think. We did a little workshop at work once with a sort of career coachy mentor type person. And she said, the only thing I could definitively find on architects is that they're really defensive because they're trained to be defensive at university. And I thought, well, that's really interesting, because then don't we wonder why the public are so alienated by us and don't understand what we do, where they're using archi-speak and big words and pretending that we're talking to each other when we think we're talking to the public. So I've tried really hard setting up my business to speak to the public and to break down deliverables and outcomes into really tangible, valuable things. Flora Samuel has a great book on this called Why Architects Matter. Breaks down 3 different types of architects and how they can better evidence what they do to the public. And I don't know if anyone caught the recent Eric Reinholdt's latest video. I did Eric Reinholdt's Entrepreneur and Architect course. And if anyone wants to know more about that, please reach out to me, because I'd love to tell you more about it. But as part of it, you can do this little coaching session with him at the end, which I did. It was very exciting. And he shared a little part of it. And he actually challenged me on whether I was still talking to other architects or the public. So that was funny. And the last one is that you belong. Architects seem to be this group of people who think they don't belong to the group. But repeatedly through my networks in architecture, I find that even though everyone thinks this, they will tell you this because they've become a part of the group that they've found. So at Lighthouse, we all felt that we were people who didn't belong in our previous firms and felt like outcasts, and that we had come together in our office. In the Architect Project, my membership for students and graduates, a lot of them will speak about wondering whether they belong in the profession and if it's right for them. But then when they find the Architect Project, they feel like, yes, they belong. People who message me on Instagram all the time. Actually, several chapter presidents that I have spoken to have said that at times in their career, they felt they didn't belong or they didn't identify with the crowd. And here they are as chapter presidents, similar with emerging architects, state and national winners. So I think that's very interesting. And it's clearly that it's just a matter of finding where you belong in the industry, and that there's many different pockets, and we all just have to find our people within the industry. So that's a run through the 10 really quick points. And now I would love to share with you where you can find more of that kind of stuff if you're interested. So obviously, pardon me, I've referenced the book. Here it is. It's $28. And it's really designed as a little handbook for anyone starting out, and is useful for anyone from first year student through to a fairly experienced graduate. And my latest exciting thing, and this is actually a bit of a sneak peek because I haven't announced this publicly yet, but my online membership is about to change a lot. So this is a little map. I'm really excited. We're about to launch a free layer. So once a month, we are going to have a free keynote session that anyone can join absolutely for free. And I'm really excited about that because the guests that we have and the discussions that we have in there that are focused on the type of things that students and graduates want and need to know, every time we have them, I just think, I need to share this information more widely. So now it will be so. Our first one's going to be the Emerging Architects Forum, which is an event I held last year as well, with each of the state winners and the national winner of the Emerging Architect Prize in a bit of a round table all together. So really insightful. And then from that, within there, I have the premium group, which is the Architect Project, which is for Australian students and graduates. And we do all kinds of things. We're launching a new format, Work Experience Wednesday, which is, my best replica of what it would be like doing work experience in an online format. Member Pechakuchas, tapping into other member knowledge. Fireside chat, they're unrecorded sessions where we talk about more sensitive things and sort of mentor each other. And you have full access to all the replay sessions we've ever had. So there's 52 sessions in there at the moment on all kinds of construction things. There's not a price on there, but it's $7 a week to come into that one, and you can come in and do a 2-week free trial and check it out. And then the Career Momentum course I'm building at the moment has such a huge amount of content in there. I've bit off way more than I can chew, but I'm getting through it. So it has, I think it's 12 topics. Not sure, do I go into it? No, I don't. 12 topics, all related to graduates. So it's for graduates of architecture around the world, and goes through things like powerful communication, tackling imposter syndrome, approaching registration, time management, working out your career path, asking for raises, all of those things into one course. So thanks for listening to me promote those things. And what about the architecture? If you do want to know more about the architecture, Cooee Architecture is my new practice, and you can follow it on the socials, mainly on Instagram. And I'd also recommend following Lighthouse as well, because Jenny shares a lot of really good energy efficiency information for temperate and cool temperate climates. And that's me. So now we can ask questions.
Finally figured out how to unmute. Thank you. That was unreal. Like, I know setting up my own practice there, basically you were inside my head then.
Yeah, right.
There are a lot of things.
Lots of shared experiences there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think point 3 is, that's a great one that you make, that, you know.
Which one was that?
That's where you know where to find your answer.
Yeah.
And that's good to know also for registration. You don't have to know where it is. And I can't count the amount of times that I've had to say, oh, look, let me go check. I'll get back to the office and I'll let you know. Yeah. So that was great. Also know that you've gone through and you spoke about your time management. I've often asked myself, how does she fit all this in? You're doing amazing things for the industry. That was going to be my question, but I guess I can understand how you've got your checklist and that you go through everything. And
yeah. I mean, I'm happy to provide more. Oh, there's the kitty cat. Yeah, I'm happy to go into more detail on that if other people have questions. Yeah.
Anyone?
Sarah, I can ask you a question. Given that you've just started your practice and I've watched Candace start hers, what were some of the things that you didn't know about how to start an architecture business that you wish you did know?
That is a really good question. I've always been interested in businesses and entrepreneurship. So I've been listening to sort of entrepreneurship and side hustle podcasts and following people like Eric Reinhold for a really long time. So I felt lucky in that I was probably more informed than a lot. And also my position at Lighthouse was pretty unique in that I was sort of managing and running a lot of things there without being the business owner, but also had great insight on how Jenny ran the business because she was so transparent. So in some ways it was a little bit of an apprenticeship from her as well on how you do things. The most confronting thing for me has been accounting and tax. I'm not a numbers accounting type person. And, you know, we've been thrown into the thick of it because it's not just setting up the business, it's also transferring all of my sole trader stuff from my first architecture job and also starting up our farm business at the same time. So that has been really full on. I nearly broke my membership the other day trying to get GST going in there. So maybe if that was one thing I perhaps would have told myself to do, maybe doing like some kind of really simple short business course from that side of things, learning the terms and the Australia specific things would have been pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Question for you. So the idea of like the Archi-Speak and the the group and the, you know, how we treat the general community and that kind of anonymosity. How do you find the balance in the social medias? Because I would say the vast majority of architectural social media is for other architects,
Yeah.
not necessarily clients.
Yeah.
How do you feel like you balance that? Who, like, do you target a certain audience in your own social media, or did Lighthouse target a certain audience?
Yeah. And I was going to say, if people would like to turn their cameras on for this part, I'd welcome you to, because it's so awkward talking to a room of blank names. So if you can turn it on, I'd love to see your face.
Sorry, I had a baby on the booth.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, welcome every time who's just listening in. It's nice to see faces. Again, I listen to a lot of marketing podcasts. I'm trying to think of the architecture firm marketing podcast by Dave Sharp is really interesting. I like that one. But also, I guess, following people who do it well and following people who aren't architects. You know, I think if you're thinking about taking on those kind of roles, it's good to just see how other industries do it, other industries that do those things well. So Amelia Lee from Undercover Architect, I find her stuff really interesting because she is used to talking to the general public and she's very good at it. But also noticing other architects that you perhaps know that your non-architect friends really connect with, and some good examples to follow on that. I think Designful from down in Tasmania. Jane's not actually a registered architect, I should say that, or people get cranky at me, but she is a rock star, and their communication, their newsletter, their socials are just so fantastic. But I did, so Jenny, who's a building scientist, also has done tertiary education in science communication. So I think I just inherently, again, learnt a lot from her about effective communication, and also having a director who wasn't an architect was really good, because she would really rap us over the knuckles when we were using words or terms that nobody understood. So that was a really great apprenticeship in that. But I mean, all you have to do is test things on your friends. So even starting up my practice, I ran some of the copy and website through some friends, and a range of people who I thought might be ideal clients, or a friend who is a marketing professional, and just seeing. But then everything is a work in progress as well, right? So interviewing past clients, I think it's really easy to finish projects and just move on. But going back and actually asking past clients really useful questions about why did they come to you? What was the experience like? What did they tell their friends about the experience? And they will always say something that surprises you, that you didn't realize they were thinking. And so the one sort of finished project I have on the website, the story about it is much more written like a magazine story. Like, it's much more of a narrative, like you might read in Sanctuary. I don't lead with, well, this is a 200 square meter house and we added this, and this is the star rating and stuff. That stuff's all down the bottom, but it really starts with them talking about what their starting situation was, the things they were worried about, what their goals were, what the process was like, and then how they found it in the end. And I think using your clients' voices is actually far more powerful than using your own.
Thanks for that. That was really insightful.
Good question.
Anyone else? Questions?
How have you found moving to a albeit back home, Sarah, but moving to a location that you weren't necessarily working as an architect and trying to find business and clients, and have you found that difficult, or does it come fairly easy, or how's that been?
Yeah, look, I have no I'm really aware of how lucky I've been and how privileged I've been in the background that I have. So, you know, Lighthouse has a huge presence on social media, and finishing up with them was such a positive transition. And Jenny's shared my practice a few times, so you know, people have been referred on from them. But even in some pretty big groups like My Efficient Electric Home on Facebook is a force to be reckoned with if anyone's in there. So, you know, just sharing things on there, and the fact that I was already active. I think probably the useful thing I can say in that is never underestimate the networks that you are currently building. If you can just go out really generously sharing what you do. So I think Seth Godin, who's just like marketing god, he says good marketing is just sharing what you do well for the benefit of the people you do it for. And if you just I think historically there was a lot of sort of secrecy and hoarding of information in architecture, and that's really changing with younger generations. We understand that a rising tide lifts all boats, and we can learn from each other. And certainly I've found that if you can just share as much as you can, people will only better understand what you do and want a piece of you more. So even through my own networks, you know, when you start a new practice, I'd suggest not starting social medias from scratch. I just transferred. I already had a sort of professional account that was me as an architect, that you're already talking to people who are interested in what you do, you're already sharing information, and then you can switch that over. And you know, it sounds it can be uncomfortable to talk about feeling like we're so slaven to these social media numbers, but if you flip it and think of it more of it as strong networks and communities, investing in your communities and your networks is always beneficial. I think even if you're not thinking about starting your own practice, even if you're going to stay in a practice, right, your networks are really worthwhile. So just share good stuff. I think you know, doing things like this. I love doing things like this, and it's amazing what pops up from little things that you do.
I guess following on from that, sorry, I'm Beck. I know
Hi, Beck.
half the people here, but not you. Do you do all your social media yourself, or do you have some help with that?
Yeah, I do it myself. Canva is amazing. Canva's a like free, intuitive graphic design sort of software, but it has templates for all the things you ever want to do. And I guess this goes to Candace's point as well about how I get everything done. I'm pretty big on thinking about what's going to be the most time efficient and the most replicatable. Is that the word? Mm-hmm. And you know, if you follow My First Architecture Job socials, up until recently, the content I was sharing took quite a bit more effort to put together, but I've just had to cull the bits that are taking up time. And now all it is me sharing like a 30-second video every couple of days talking about something, because that's the quickest way I can get good content out to everyone. I'm also pretty big on templates and systematizing everything. So a lot of the My First Architecture Job stuff was a template, and I just sort of dropped the stuff in. The best content was every guest that we had, we asked what's their number one piece of advice for emerging architects, and then just trimming that, posting that. But also outsourcing things that you don't want to do. So even as just with a freelancing side hustle, you know, I have 2 members of the Architect Project who are really keen and I give them free membership for just doing some tiny tasks for me. And it's not that those things take up a lot of time, but it's just the mental load of me thinking about doing them every couple of weeks, and they love doing that. But also Upwork is a really great platform for short contract jobs. So after I did the Emerging Architect tour, I had done these surveys as we went around, and people had written in really beautiful, thoughtful responses and suggestions, but I wanted to transcribe them all to be typed up. And I thought, well, I can either sit here and use 3 hours typing this up, or I posted it onto Upwork for like $15, and someone somewhere in the world transcribed it for me. So, I mean, most people think that outsourcing isn't for them unless they can afford to have like a full-time personal assistant or a student or an office manager. But these days, there's just so many ways that you can tap into that just for small jobs. I've used Upwork for quite a few things, like photoshopping jobs that I don't know how to do anymore. I just post them up and someone else does them. Or
I never thought of that. That's a great idea. So do you outsource quite a few different tasks like that?
I have done a few. I also have a paid member in the Architect project. He runs every second session. And again, just the mental load off me. And he helped me out when I was on maternity leave, because obviously I needed to take a break, but the sessions still had to be run. So he does that as a contractor. Other things I've done on Upwork, a little photoshopping job, the transcribing. I recently got a tech person when I broke my platform trying to do the GST, and I was really stuck. I was like, there's someone who knows how to do this better than me. And of course you go on there and there's heaps of them that know how to work Stripe and just come in and tap away, and they're like, yeah, this is the problem. This is how you do it. But I think, it's I'm actively trying to be more like that now. So like I haven't paid for Photoshop, because I'm slow. I'm already outdated using Photoshop. I feel like students and graduates can do that better than me. I don't want to even pay for the subscription. And it's been a really nice line to draw in the sand, because not having the subscription forces me to get someone to contract do it if I need something done. And that's where I can see myself going to more next, because I'm really intimidated by the idea of having an employee and being responsible for them and their income and supporting their family. So I'll probably dabble in short contract jobs for a while before I do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I probably have one for you as well. It's just about when you're starting out a practice and how you charge your fees and how not to undervalue your services. Was there particular advice that you'd give on that?
Yeah. And I think all of us want to help people, right? And it's funny because I was like, as I said, how Jenny ran Lighthouse and how we did fees and stuff, I was very much involved in, and she was super transparent. And I was really comfortable with how the fees were put together. I was comfortable telling Lighthouse clients about them. But it was really funny how intimidated I was as soon as it was my own practice, even though there really wasn't that much difference. It's funny how once you are the head person responsible for it, it's very intimidating. So there'd probably be a few tips on that one. And the first one is to actually try and work out how much time something is going to take. I think we can get really caught up in, well, what percentage is someone else charging? But it's such a useless number unless you are doing a comparative service. Second one would be to find one of the podcasts that Blue Turtle has done. So Blue Turtle consult architects on writing fee proposals. And I've listened to a few podcasts they've guested on, and they sort of have the same spiel that they go through. And it's a really interesting breakdown. They say that people are very bad at judging value, but very good at comparing and contrasting. So you sort of use that by giving them options within your own fee proposal so that they don't have to go to other architects to get that compare and contrast. So with my own services, it's sort of broken down so people can see, well, I can have a much smaller fee and this is what that service cuts out, or there's sort of this premium fee over here and this is the extra things that I get. And supposedly the experts say that human brains really like this. And also back to that business knowledge, I think you really have to understand your overheads. Eric Reinholdt's course was really good in that sense. He had some Excel sheets that he's done that you get as part of doing the course, which was really nice to cross-reference with my own Excel sheets. It is mind-blowing how much more you need to charge because often people start freelancing before they're going to start a practice. And I feel like when you are freelancing as a side hustle, that is the most lucrative you're ever going to be, because you're freeloading off actually a whole lot of things from your job, whether that's your professional development or having a network and your software and everything. As soon as you start having real overheads as a practice, it's sort of mind-blowing. And the rule of thumb that I've heard of is that you need to charge 2.5 times what you want to have in your pocket at the end of the day. I remember that from registration. And I mean, gosh, I'm certainly no expert on it from the 2 months I've been operating, but so far that seems to be sort of a good indication.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's another interesting thing because, I have some friends who might do some contracting work for me. And that's even really insightful into what hiring employees is like, because you want to pay them all the money, but, there's still actually not just the overheads, but you start doubling up on time because it's not just you doing things. You have to double. There's a lot of things that you're both attending. So I guess that really throws the equation out as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you would know, we should be asking you this, Candice. You have employees.
Do you feel like that's a big gap in architecture education, is how to find what your overheads are? I found that that's been one of the things that you really have to find out on your own just by trial and error.
Yeah, and a lot of, this goes back to a whole big theme. Everyone assumes that because I wrote the book 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School, that it's a criticism of architecture school, but I don't really mean it that way at all, because what would you take out of your uni education to put all those things in? And so on the construction side of things, I think actually our model of you have to work for a few years before you go through registration is really excellent, because everyone's context is so different, whether it's a different climate or a different region or a different sector of the industry. You could never pack all of that into a university course. And so learning it on the job makes sense. And I sort of feel similarly about business stuff, because such a small percentage of us will ever run businesses. And, is it up to whatever discipline you're studying to teach you how to run a business? I do think there should be some key things covered off, like intellectual property and copyright and those sort of ideas. And I think most unis sort of cover them. But in terms of actually running a business, it's probably more effective to go do a short course maybe than to pop that in the university degree. And I also think it's worth thinking about when you're in the right frame of mind about thinking about things. I think I covered, I remember learning vaguely about planning rules at university and some of the different legislation that's out there, but there was no context for me. So it wasn't really useful to be learning it at the time. Whereas once you're learning that on the job, it's far more relevant.
Thank you. I have another question. As you're creating your, content strategy for your new practice, what are some things you mentioned before that a lot of, social media presence for studios is sort of framed at other architects? What are some things that you're thinking about putting in your content that's more aimed at your actual target audience?
Yeah. Oh, lots of just little things that I've learned or that people have passed on come to mind. I mean, one podcast said so many architecture firms start with like their homepage is all about them as the architect. But when you think about when you're shopping for something or a service, you don't really care about the person that's delivering it to you. You just want to know what they're going to do for you, right? So that was really useful in, you should use a lot of you sentences on your front page. So I mean, I've tried to do that. I'd love to do a session with a marketing expert to get them to just critique my website and tear it to shreds. That would be fun. If anyone wants to do that, I'd be open to that. Someone's coming in right at the 11th hour. So that was a good tip. Use you sentences rather than me or I sentences. And then the Eric Reinhold video has prompted some very interesting discussions with marketing friends about the reason people purchase. Particularly on the point of sustainability. So this was the one point I wanted to argue with Eric about. He claimed that everyone does sustainability and no one really comes to an architect for sustainability, which I would argue both points pretty strongly. But then another marketing friend broke it down in a different way, which I can see the point of, is that human beings never really do something selfless. You know, we buy into sustainability because it makes us feel good morally. We feel like we're doing the right thing, or because we know our power bills are going to be lower, or we know we're going to be healthier. There's actually basic human motivators that you can try and tap into more. So I guess that ties into what I always try to do, is just you ask yourself why 5 times is an exercise that some people say. So you might say, well, this house was 2 stars and we got it to 8 stars. And it's like, well, why is that important? So then you might say, well, that's a 73% reduction in heating and cooling load. Well, why is that important? Well, you're going to be comfier and happier, and it's going to stay warmer or cooler. Well, why is that important? Well, you're going to save money on your energy bill at the end of the day, and you're going to have better relationships because you won't be cold and cranky, and you'll be healthier because your kid won't have asthma. Well, why is that important? Because we want a good life and we want to care for our family, and you can just keep going and break it into those bigger things. But the question I have is, even if those things are true, do people want to be told the end result why, or do they do that subconscious calculation themselves? So that's my question for a marketing expert. Do you give them the end motivator, or do you still leave them to feel good about doing the right thing?
Thank you for sharing. That's so insightful.
I hope it's useful. You guys are asking really awesome questions. I want to ask all of you questions, but
I can confirm, Sarah, that as much as every architect would like to do sustainable architecture and stuff like that, some of us just don't. There's nothing sustainable about the architecture that I do. But anyway, that's more of the job that I do rather than the architecture I do. But anyway, have you ever thought about writing another book about starting an architecture practice? And
I wouldn't
saying things you don't know, like what are your overheads, insurances, software, servers, storage, all that kind of stuff, internet. And have you ever thought about doing that?
I think I need a lot more experience to write that book. I did have another book that I wanted to write, and then I found out Parler had essentially done it. I wanted to write letters to my younger architect self. I thought that would be a really easy format to do, reaching out to a heap of architects to just share a letter to themselves and then put it in a book. But Parler essentially have done that series, and it is a really good read. And I would probably never, I don't know if I'll ever do another book to be honest. I knew this going into a book, but someone said books are just really powerful business cards. And I tend to agree with that. I mean, I've self-published and had a good niche audience to sell to. So I'm probably at the stage where I have paid myself for my time just on doing the book. But as I'm sure you guys know, their books aren't big money makers. But what it has unlocked in terms of credibility or people knowing you or building networks is huge. And I'm not sure you can put a value on that, right? So it's not all about money at the end of the day. What I'm more interested in now is the membership platform that we build, I think is really valuable. And now I'm dabbling in the courses as well. And I'd be much more likely to share that sort of information in that kind of setting in courses and membership platforms. I think you can share your knowledge without coming across as a, or trying to work out how to be a definitive authority. Like books feel so legally binding, and like you have to have the correct answer and you're publishing it, and it's this thing that hundreds of people buy, and if you find a mistake you can't get those back and edit them, right? Whereas courses and communities are a much better way, I think, to share information and knowledge in a two-way conversation and with a bit more context. So that's probably where I'll go with if I ever do more things like that, and would encourage other people to go as well. I think this is a complete sidetrack, but has anyone listened to, what's his name? Johan. He's recently published a book about why we're all distracted. Maytree, the architects, shared it in their newsletter. It's called The Imperfects, podcast by The Imperfects. And the episode is something about why we're all distracted. And he talks about sort of the failings of social media. But I think what's exciting about it is I can see how social media is probably going to change. And I think there's going to be a lot more buy-in platforms and memberships where we can go for the type of stuff we wanted without being bombarded by all the stuff that we don't. And I'm pretty convinced that that's the way things are going to go, and people are going to value that. A bit like Netflix, I guess. It's about changing models of things from a advertiser pays and therefore the service is designed for the advertiser, to user pays and therefore the service is designed for the user. And I'm excited about what that's going to mean for professional networks, but education and just different communities of interest. If anyone wants to know how to launch a community like what I have on Mighty Networks, I'd be totally happy to share info on that.
Sounds like a very big undertaking.
Yeah.
It's so not. So, I mean, all of my hesitations about starting a business is a big undertaking. Writing a book is a big undertaking. Starting a membership is really not. And platforms like, I use Mighty Networks. There's another one just launched called Circle, and there's Kunjabi is another one. They are so set up for you. I couldn't believe actually how easy it was to get started, because they're just designed, they're intuitive and they're designed, and they know how to make communities work well. And actually, of all the things I've done, that was probably a walk in the park.
That's interesting.
Did you originally start with the Mighty Networks, or is that something you've jumped to?
No, I did start with them. Why did I start with Circle? Wasn't up and running at that point, and I didn't know about Kunjabi. I couldn't actually tell you how I found them originally. I think maybe they had been interviewed on one of the business podcasts I listened to. But they're a pretty big player in that an all-in-one service, and they have all kinds of communities. So the beauty of them is it's sort of community plus courses if you want to sell courses as well. and courses in a sort of live community sense rather than a sort of intimidating big thing that you have to publish, a bit like a book or a perfected video series.
Before you mentioned that you did a bit of a master class. What was that regarding again?
The Eric's one?
Yeah,
Do you mean?
I think that was it.
So, I mean, I talk like everyone, I assume everyone knows Eric Reinhold. Everyone should know Eric Reinhold. He's my hero. Okay. Eric Reinhold is a architect from Maine in America.
Yep.
He has a huge YouTube following. I'm not really a YouTube person, but he's very big on YouTube. And he has built he fascinates me because he has built a solo practice that has become very lucrative for him based on passive products. So he's gotten to the point where he just works for one client at a time. And then he has all these other passive things, basically, all kinds of income streams, courses. He dabbled in plan sets, but he has the book Architect and Entrepreneur. So one of the first things he did was write this book, Architect and Entrepreneur, about how architects can diversify their income streams and impact more people than just working for one-on-one clients. And he shares all of it in really high quality, enjoyable YouTube videos as well. And so when I was thinking about starting a practice, I knew he had a course which just goes into a bit more depth than his book. And it was pretty amazing. It was more amazing for me in just that motivation that I needed to really set a firm mindset, to believe in myself, to create the vision, and not to just sort of stumble into taking whatever project came my way. And the reason I say ask me about it is because I've loved it so much, I've become an affiliate. So if anyone's interested in purchasing the course, you should talk to me so that he knows that I sent you. You know, it's all very pyramid scheme-ish. No. But he also shares a stack of resources in there. So I mentioned the spreadsheet. So he shares his like back-end spreadsheet that helps you work out overheads and things. But as I explained before, I was pretty across all the sort of businessy side of things. So what I got more value out of was the vision stuff. And I meant to say before, Candice, when you were talking about pricing things, and I was going to say how everyone wants to help more people, but the wrong way to do that is to do that by charging less and, you know, oh, just make my fee lower because these people can't afford it. And then you're not doing a proper job and you're really stressed and angry at everyone. So what I'm trying to do is make myself available for the amount of time that people can afford. So whether that is if some people just really need help with the feasibility and some ideas of what to do with their house and a bit of help with the science stuff, and that's all they can engage me for, that's totally fine. And I'm thrilled that I can help them. And then different levels of service depending on what's valuable to them in how much they have that one-on-one service. So sorry, answered 2 questions there. Does that answer the first question that was asked? Yeah. But yeah, check, I mean, yeah,
you know
I
what
thought
I'm gonna be
everyone knew
doing.
who Eric was.
No, sorry.
Great book. Where is it? It's somewhere here.
Do you have an end goal of where you're going with everything, or is it?
Oh, gee, that's a good question.
That actually came out of what you were saying before about having, I guess, a plan and the course. But are you going somewhere?
There's always different visions. I have thought about this because a lot of people ask me this. I can see a full spectrum. Like one end of the spectrum is like become Eric Reinhold. Like I just think it's amazing that he helps so many people, not just clients, but or regular people, but also students and graduates, while running a sole practice in an equitable way. Like he's really cracked something there, and, you know, rethinking models of service. But then at the other end of the spectrum, and this probably won't happen, but who knows, maybe if I really get into the regional architecture thing and can really work out my systems and processes and beliefs and things, what if there was this network of Kui Architecture regional practices all across Australia, right? There was a methodology and there was some beliefs and there were processes, but then there was people heading up each, node who knew the local place and were connected to their local community and country and could replicate that. I'm sure that won't happen, but that's like, in my wildest dreams vision.
I mean, I feel like the three of us that have cameras on that aren't you, we're part of a group loosely that formed of, like, I make furniture and do a few things. I'm not actually architecting at the moment. But like, we formed a group that meets once a month as a support network, but we had a lot of conversations around that as like, and we haven't really done it in a way, but like, we're all doing the same legwork to achieve the same goal. And obviously we kind of want to work by ourselves and do our own thing, but there's a lot of, I guess, parallel work we've all kind of got to do by ourselves that takes a lot of time and effort and then mental energy. It's like we just chat and I guess share help. Is that a fair? I don't know what we do, but I've really enjoyed it and got a lot from it.
That's awesome.
It's become our little, okay, we have a question.
Yeah.
Let's reach out. Let's get our network. Who knows how to answer this question? I think that's been so valuable.
Yeah, that's so good. And I mean, Jenny at Lighthouse, she had a heap of amazing ideas, but one of them that she would love to achieve is to create a lighthouse standard that's like almost an accreditation, a lighthouse accreditation, so that you could meet a set of standards and systems for your house. And that's almost like another version of, I guess it's a kind of franchising of what you're doing, and allowing your effort and knowledge to have greater impact, I guess. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting ways you can do it. And I think, I always love looking at other industries and what they're up to. I remember when I was first employed to look at the modular system, that was when like places like Zambreros and things were becoming really popular. And it was like, well, how do you still have this customized? It's called like the customization era or something. We had these decades of going into pre-made things, and now it's going back into how can you customize really efficiently. And I think it's so fascinating to study other industries and what they're doing and how they're innovating, and question how we can apply that to architecture, because 99% of architecture still follows the same model that we have for decades. And the options are just so ripe for the taking for other people who are willing to be entrepreneurs and think outside the box.
I'm just going to keep coming up with questions. You're gonna have to cut me off.
Still got one. I'm happy to hang around.
So I know that your practice deals with low carbon housing, and I noticed it a bit around ACT, and it seems to be really popular down your way. It's something that, especially the terminology around it, is not. It hasn't got a lot of traction up here yet. Like everything, I'm sure it will. But are you finding that a lot of clients are specifically asking for that now?
No. And maybe that's just because of my like the background of the communities I'm in. But my sense of the industry is that we have spent a good decade focusing on energy efficiency, and broadly I think we're becoming pretty comfortable with that. I think most people in this space know how to hit like 8 stars ER fairly easily. We know it's pretty doable, but like such change the last few years in realizing we need to do more. And a change in realizing that it doesn't matter how energy efficient your house is if we keep building new houses is the bigger picture. but also a change in technology. So what's been really amazing is that all of a sudden calculating life cycle carbon has turned from this very expensive custom service to there's a few people doing sort of rapid apps. And I think the reason you're seeing more of it in Canberra is because an incredible group of people, Melinda Dodson, Rob Henry, David Clark, started this low carbon housing challenge a couple of years ago. It will be going nationwide soon, so it's really worth checking out. But they partnered with eTool, who do carbon life cycle analysis calculating, and they have developed a rapid LCA app that anyone can pay for. And they have their own little presentations online showing you how it works. And I attended an Institute CPD event on it, and it blew my mind how straightforward it was and how achievable actually carbon neutral housing actually is at the moment with grid feed in. That might change in a few years as our grid becomes really green. So the low carbon housing challenge in Canberra paired up with them so that together they could sort of test their rapid LCA tool and run a competition. And they got a heap of Canberra architects to model their projects. It costs $50 per project to model it. Like, it's very affordable. And it takes maybe, I think once you got good at it, you could probably do a house in 45 minutes. But probably my first time took me maybe 3 or 4 hours to work out what information I needed and do all the calculations. And I hope you've still got me. It says my internet connection's unstable. It's so doable. And so I think that's going to become really popular and really easy to jump into playing with. So eTool's the group that I know, but I think there's other groups doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone else have any questions?
I
Well, thank
don't have any
you.
more questions, but
They were such good questions. I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's
My
been an
pleasure,
absolute
honestly.
honor to have you on. And I do have to thank you on behalf of a lot of young architects. Thank you so much for doing that book.
Look, all I'm doing is sharing. Like, it just comes back to that thing. Share generously.
Which, like you say, is just not common in the industry. So no, I'm not a hero. I don't know it all, but it has been I've actually been blown away by the feedback I get from people. I've had zero criticism, and I get just incredible messages from people. So if maybe that's the sorry,
one question. Is it something that comes naturally to you, or like my version is I just hate doing stuff like that? Is it something that you felt comfortable with, or you've sort of learned how to do it and got over it?
It's so funny, the point in the presentation about work out what your strengths are. I think it's that thing, we don't realize what our own strengths are because they come so naturally to us. And I have probably realized through all of this that it's quite natural for me to not just communicate, but to connect ideas and to connect people. And that's probably my strength more than knowing it all. I'd never claim to be an expert in anything, but happy to share ideas and pull ideas together and communicate them. I think I'm quite comfortable with. But at the same time, Beck, I can remember filming my first Instagram video. I was like in nervous sweats. I think I filmed it about 30 times, and it's just that matter of growing your comfort circle, because now, like, the Instagram's videos that I post on my first architecture job to like 25,000 people, I just think nothing of. It's just become such a comfortable thing. But even though I was happy, I've always felt reasonably comfortable public speaking, it was still absolutely terrifying the first time I did it. So, for anyone out there, I think it's just we're always learning and growing. And but yeah, if there's one takeaway from today, I think it's actually focus less on all of the self-learning and development, and just start sharing stuff, which
Yeah,
you
that's
guys
great.
do, because you guys are like, you know, the committee for EmAGN.
All right. Well, thanks again for that.
Thank
yeah, we
you.
can't thank you enough for joining us tonight.
No, thanks for having me. It's been really awesome.
Thanks very much.
No worries. All right. Catch everyone.
Bye,
another
everyone.
time.
Thanks for
Bye.
joining.
Bye. See you guys.